Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves an EP from an act named EsJay titled the EsJay EP. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the EP on the screen on BandLab. Now, just making it nice and big on the screen for you, I've got a total of 4 tracks in this one. We're going to be listening through 3 of them today. We're going to be listening through Resting Place featuring King Flame CEO as well as Dreamer and Stars. We're going to listen through each of these tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Starting with Resting Place featuring King Flame CEO, let's do it. Released on Christmas Eve, I think, December 24th. Fascinating high note there with the harmonies.
Silk sheets and fluffy pillows, that could be your resting place. Put that kitty on me, baby, it won't get no rest today. Unless you bout the business, baby, I got nothing else to say. Rest your legs up on my shoulders, you could join the trap today. All occasion specials when you chillin' in my presence. Unwrap that kitty like a present, I'm just trying to play today. I'm just trying to bless it, baby, you should come and slide this way. I'm just trying to live you up tonight, we gonna smoke some plain. Take you to another level, no, I'm never smoking plain. Say that she don't care about the fame, she wanna feel the cane. Smoking Mary Jane with Mary blazing, they could ride the wave. So why these haters hating, want to see that we be so unfazed? Not feeling how we coming, tell them haters they could turn the page. King Flame gon' keep it real no matter how you read the page. I keep my real ones in my space and keep these goofies out my face. No matter how you hate me, nigga, I'ma do me anyway.
The flow is solid. Nice transition back to the hook, the sampled hook. The kit's a bit dominant, but it has a nice solid groove to it.
I'm afraid that this is my resting place. I live in the most depressing place. Stomach turning at the thought I'm losing the race I started. I ran at full speed, but now my energy's depleted and my childhood's departed. I used to run street to street and come back still pure-hearted. I've lost the path to my childhood I once charted. I'm not saying I ain't got no life in me no more, but if you speak those words, I will take it as an insult. I'm not oversensitive or constantly offended. I just find it hard to say my childhood ended. I came to this place with sun gleaming down on my heart. The gray rolling in the blue dropped down from above. I'm forced to live on an island of no good.
On
the only fire in me comes from drenched driftwood. I set up an SOS sign, but it's mainly misunderstood. Choppers fly overhead, drop down the ladder, climb on up, say what's up to sunshine, but that's not a thing no more. The rain's the only thing that fills my cup.
I see what they were going for here. Interesting pause there as well, it's very dramatic. I do like the use of the sample, like at the end and in the chorus sections and everything like that. I like it a lot. In this section, we're going to give just like a breakdown of this track as well as the other 2 when we get to them, and then there'll be like a final overall sort of like analysis at the end. But for Resting Place featuring King Flame CEO, the first track off of the EsJay EP, I feel like it's a really strong start. I think what do we think it's about? I think it's about trying to find your happiness with either the person you're with whether it's someone you love or someone you appreciate or someone you're close to. But the second verse was interesting because it almost kind of seemed like we were nostalgic for how things used to be. You know, now that we've grown up, we're sort of maybe struggling to find our happiness. You know, like the first verse is talking about how we keep our real ones in our space and everything like that, and trying to sort of find a sense of comfort within our situation. And then like in the second verse, we're more sort of discussing how kind of we're looking back at how things were versus now. And we talk about filling our cup and trying to find happiness within ourselves, or trying to find meaning and purpose within life. I just feel like there's different angles that we're exploring here from different personalities, and it's or different people involved in this collaboration. You know, either EsJay and King Flame CEO. And I do like that we're not just trying to sort of connect on the same thing. We're kind of giving our own perspectives on, you know, our resting place, I suppose, and trying to find it. The track itself consists of that main sort of sampled hook line with the lady singing, talking about, you know, believing that they can finding happiness, and then that kind of response where you go up into the high register with the harmonies and the vibrato, and it's kind of a sort of vintage nostalgic feel, like an old vinyl spec. And it makes it seem like this is a tale as old as time, I suppose. We then have the first verse come in, and immediately we've got the kind of rapped verses there, and we've got a verse per person involved in the track. And I feel like that's just a really easy way to split up a song like this, is to kind of give everyone their own sort of 16 bars or whatever to kind of spit their truth. And if you come back to the hook in between, it's just a fundamental where it sort of ties it together. It's just their own belief of how they can find their own happiness. At the end there, around the 3-minute mark, when there's a guy that comes in and says, "That's right, girl, I'll be your friend," to the very end, it makes me think that we're trying to find resolution within the context there. Like we're answering to the woman what they're discussing throughout the majority of the track. And if that's like a conscious decision at the input, I think that's really sensible. It's interesting to me because the vocals, especially the second verse, are quite prominent in the mix, to the extent where I'm wondering if when we were producing this, whether or not we mixed this in mono as well as stereo. I'm kind of wondering whether we were listening in stereo through both sides of the stereo field, hearing that our vocals were where they were and very happy with them. But when I listen through these headphones, they just sound a bit prominent, especially the second verse. It's not a bad thing. It's not like it diminishes the experience. It's just a post-production thing I'm mentioning for transparency. I think some of the fundamental instruments that I heard throughout this listening session with this track specifically were the drums and the bass. I think that the kind of groove that we had on the kit there with an acoustic pattern there was really sensible there. The kind of hush low-key tones of the kicks, the snares, a bit of chain and sizzle on them, as well as the cymbals. With some claps as well, actually. It might have been a clap instead of a snare there, but it was just an alternate percussion, almost like we're kind of dancing along together or singing along, trying to find our own happiness. Might even be a sample drum kit, actually, considering the clap, but either way, it had this kind of tone to it where it wasn't trying to sound too modern by any means. It's like they might have sampled an acoustic kit and done some sort of like mixing or melding of different samples together in post. But we had a measure of different quarters, 8ths and 16ths there, which was really cool. It was nice to have a bit of variation with the way things worked from an on-beat and syncopated perspective. I think also the bass guitar was incredibly dominant here. We had an electric bass, and it wasn't just playing the root notes within the chord progressions that were in the kind of backing. It was exploring do-do-do-do. It had this kind of cool Motownish kind of feel to it, where it was comfortable even doing sort of jazzy kind of elements there. It wasn't wanting to sort of sit still for too long, but it wasn't dominant enough to defer or kind of deter the listener's attention away from the drums or the vocal parts. It was just a great sort of additional sense of coloration that worked well alongside some of the brass parts that were a bit more kind of whole tone-ish. In fact, I'm actually wondering if there was, I think there might have been occasional, I can definitely hear strings in there as well, but they're incredibly subtle in the mix there. I think because of the filtering on the kind of sampler main sort of backing component they had there. They weren't trying to make them too prominent. There was also some single coil guitars that had a nice shimmer and sheen to them and offered a sort of a really kind of resolute glow to it. There was a kind of a really kind of dreamy sort of like tone to it there, almost like we kind of knew we were eventually going to find someplace positive, we just hadn't found it yet. And I think just to mention the actual, like, the lady singing with the backing vocalist or whoever they were with just sounded gorgeous on its own there. This is the power of kind of hip hop and rap, where we use these samples as like a main hook line and then we kind of add our own perspective to it. I feel like we amalgamated those elements well. And we had a lot of sophistication with the note choices in the background as well, again with those kind of trumpets there and their sections there. They weren't an all the time thing, it was usually staccato to kind of accented notes within space or call responses. But yeah, I think not having the drums all the time was a smart move as well. Allowed some of the strings and brass and sort of guitar parts to float within the sample arrangement. It allowed more room to sort of hear what the guy was saying in that 3-minute mark, and added compositional diversity within the piece. I should note there as well, just because I haven't mentioned it, but I think outside of the leveling of the vocals, I felt that the rapper on the first verse was very comfortable and confident in their position. And I think that the second verse was handled really well as well. Most of the cadences and phrases of the lines that were put forward were really effective. I quite liked them. It seemed like a reasonably confident performance. It'd be interesting to see how we navigate different styles of music as we go through it, but I think this is a strong first impression, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this could be, because I think they've been rapping, EsJay's been rapping for almost a year now, so I feel like this is great progress man on time. And this is the beauty of you know, BandLab and other sort of like sites where you can share your music around. I feel like it's just a really positive environment to be in. But ultimately, yeah, no, we're comfortable on the microphone, we expressed ourselves well, and I think we're earnest and honest. And again, aside from, again, the vocals being kind of prominent in the mix to an extent where they might have been a little bit too much, and we could have potentially, again, listened through it in mono just to kind of meter those levels. Otherwise, a very effective start to proceedings there. I liked the EQ and coloration, the combination of the sample with the vocal styles was effective, and aside from a little bit of kind of vocal distortion, again due to the loudness in the mix, ultimately, yeah, it's really good. The percussion thumped away, you know, you could hear the bass and the drums underneath it. Nothing was too distracting. And let us continue as we have Dreamer, track number 2 for today. Guitar tone is hypnotic.
Look, some people dream of stacking up a couple $100 to spare, or walking up to anyone and acting debonair. Some dream of having everything they want with a cherry on top. Some even dream of running a non-stop bakery shop. But when you listen to me and the lyrics I'ma spit, you'll catch the vision that I'm trying to transmit. See, I got common dreams, but with a twist to it. I dream of stepping out a limo onto the red carpet. I dream of shaking hands with all my favorite artists. I dream of singing songs on stage for thousands of people. And as I sing, they sing every word I wrote, note for note. I dream of hearing my song on the radio with people blasting it in their cars as they drive by. But I don't dream of doing songs just for the money. I'd rather drink honey laced with Fent by a dummy. I fucking hate the guys who just do it for the cash and green. With each rhyme I write, with each step I climb, I get better. Because I'm a dreamer and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway.
No, that was a great start, man. Just kind of makes you wonder where we're going to go from here, where they're going to further elaborate.
Every night I hop in my bed, cocking my head as it's filled with dreams that soften my dread. They lighten the pain, help me keep trotting ahead. I'm always broken, soaking up all of the pain. My dreams keep me hoping and scoping for some fame. I dream of being on stage, rapping mic in hand. I'd spit the favorites and the hits, exciting fans. Haters will watch my every move in a frightened trance. Till then, I'll stand my ground in a defying stance. Let's face it, I wouldn't be shit without EsJay. He's the reason that yo wasn't put to rest. Hey, now look, I got a shot at fancy real estate. Now look at me, spitting fire like a lighter. I speak the truth, not a liar, just a fighter. I dream of reaching heights higher than Aspire. Then I awake, discover it was all just fake. But success ain't only gotta be at midnight. If I still fight, then soon I will find happiness. But until then, when I'm that damn rich, I'm just a dreamer.
I'm a dreamer, and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer, and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer, and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway. I'm a dreamer, and I'll dream all day. I don't care what you say, I'll do it anyway.
I mean, fair enough. I like how assertive it is. There's like a buzz to some of the hits on the drum kit that kind of gives it a unique sort of tone and texture. Great use of a fade out here. Very good. And that probably sounds like I'm being patronizing, but I swear I'm not being patronizing. It's so important to not just allow a track to end awkwardly. Having that fade out is just a nice, easy way to go into the next song off of a theme that we might not otherwise know how to resolve. It's really smart. So Dreamer track number 2 is an interesting, it's an interesting chaser to Resting Place. We've got someone discussing how they have dreams that they want to work towards, that they aspire to, fantasies of having everyone hear their music and playing on stage and getting to meet all the artists that they want to. And I think that there's something, uniquely kind of satisfying listening to that. A lot of the time when I listen to hip hop and rap, and if I review it, people will sort of be communicating that they already feel as if they've made it, even if they might not have done so. But what I like about EsJay is that they're saying, hey, I want to get there. I want to be at that position. And so it makes me feel like I want to go for the underdog, if that makes sense. Not that I think that they're doing a poor job as a rapper, but they're acknowledging that there's some stuff that they need to do before then. And I know that the sort of us versus them thing, especially in battle rap and stuff like that, and it's part of it, and it's totally fine. But it's just kind of cool to have that kind of humility being shown within the track, especially when we're kind of building ourselves up, exploring what we're capable of as a musician and as a vocalist. I think it's really cool. I think outside of the subject matter, what's really neat about Dreamer is that I think we were trying to go for different perspectives. There's a quieter vocal line later on where I think we're in bed maybe dreaming about what was going on there. And I'm not sure if the change in loudness was deliberate or not. It seemed a bit more sort of low key there, so I'm wondering if we're going for that effect, why it seems like it's our thought processes kind of like in our mind there. You might add a little bit of kind of reverb or delay or like an EQ filter there to kind of make it a bit more sort of dreamlike, and then you'd kind of come back to the main sort of vocal part like we did, where we kind of slammed it in place. The comment where I talk about the vocal leveling with Resting Place is the same here with Dreamer. I feel that the vocals are maybe a little bit too prominent in the mix, but nonetheless, it doesn't mean that they're uninteresting to listen to. I feel like we're starting to kind of become more confident with the way we carry ourselves. I think when I listen to musicians, like as they find themselves, they become more sort of, again, assertive, not just with the words that they say, because a lot of this was really articulate, but the way they express themselves. And it's nice. There were some lines or sort of phrases here where it was like, yeah, no, they've got it. There are other parts where like I heard words that, the rhyme scheme was kind of a bit unconventional, but it doesn't mean it was done poorly. It was just like, oh, we're doing that kind of blunt, kind of heel turn kind of thing here. I think that can be effective when you're taking the listener on a journey, because again, if you've got the ABAB or the AABB thing going the entire time, it's a bit kind of naff, but the fact that we're kind of exploring with that is really cool as well. I think the vocal lines that we have, the harmonies, those lines that we have within the beginning of Dreamer are wonderfully You know, they're wonderfully connected. They are so dreamy. They are mesmerizing. It's so beautiful. And we have a lot of reverb and delay tails and things here, which make it seem very misty when we listen through the track. And we have these kind of guitar takes with this kind of echo or sort of feedback on it, where they kind of fade into the ether there. And it's also that we're in that mid to upper range as well, where it's just incredibly soothing to listen to. The music surrounds you in the headphones as well, so you're just enveloped in it. I think the keys you have here with the slower attacks, so they're not kind of sharp or anything like that. It's got this kind of lo-fi hip hop sort of approach there, where because it softens and smooths it out, everything's kind of like again, it's very sort of misty sounding, very sleepy sounding. I was taken by surprise a little bit, not in a bad way, but like the tone of the drums, that kind of buzz or kind of click to it. It's an unconventional drum tone, and it's not like it's too loud or anything like that, but it does kind of click and clack its way through the mix. It's present because it's not as soft as a lot of the other parts, but it also isn't like loud in the mix. So it more sort of like neatly side chains it and sort of adds a sense of pace or groove to it, even at a very steady tempo. I think when you modulate your vocals or that kind of sample take up an octave there, it almost becomes like a synthesizer, and it's endearing. It's a little bit creepy, I suppose, especially if you weren't necessarily sure of the context of it. Like if I suddenly played it, it might be a little bit sort of unsettling, but because you've already had that mid-range version of it there, you're like, oh, I get, they're just kind of trying to do more with it to kind of keep the song interesting from a compositional perspective. The use of the 16th kind of hits on some of the cymbal pads on the kit as well is really smart. There just is an adjustment of the sort of pace of the piece. And the fact that it's not an all the time thing, they don't just go they go add little gaps in there to sort of make it a bit less predictable is really neat. And there's also these kind of very subtle hi-hat shimmers there, the way they open the hi-hat a little bit. They kind of build it up like a faux riser. I think that the bass in this is more sort of related to some of the key patterns. It's like if it's not an 808, it's very kind of floaty regardless there. And I dig that. It's just a completely different kind of aesthetic to Resting Place. We are able to sort of assert ourselves over different types of subgenres of the main, hip hop and rap, and do the best we can within it in a way where we are comfortable. I think, again, the use of the extensions within the chord progressions is effective because it complicates the mood of it there. The sleepy tones of a lot of the softer elements make it seem more like a nighttime kind of thing. Like it's not just a dream that we're having, but a dream we're having when we think about it at night. And I think, again, the guitars that we have there with, again, the lo-fi kind of sound to them, kind of chopped a little bit, kind of modulated a little bit with a bit of chorus and stuff like that. It's just a very sweet sounding device there because they're not playing any harsh kind of intervals or chord progressions or lines there. It's all diatonic there, and it respects the chords within the chords within the progression quite well. The extensions that I mentioned, there's some of the jazzy chords there. Studio production wise, again, outside of the vocal leveling stuff I mentioned, I think it's the way that we affect the sound of the interpretation of those keys, of the vocals there, the way we kind of make them warble and simmer within the ether with the reverbs and delay tails and all that other stuff. A lot of the techniques and the effects chains are what makes this track really special. I do think the leveling in general, the actual backing itself is fantastic. It's nice to allow without pumping. Music surrounds you in the headphones, and I actually think that part where we were kind of sleepy talking about, like when the vocals were quieter, that was actually more closer to the volume that we might want for that part if we were to like cut at like 150 hertz or something like that, just to kind of make it more like a radio filter. But then of course there are some parts I'm listening to here where like the vocals do sound totally fine with the kit. I mean, it's all good, it's all right. Again, like I still think that generally the elements niche well together. There's no weird resonant frequencies, and there's not a note out of place. So we've got Stars, track number 4 for the EP, the final one for today. Back to the electric bass.
Look, I've been dreaming for a while now, dreaming to the stars, and I can smile now. When I dream, there ain't no bat I can reach trace, just pure freedom, all stored in one place. I love it when I can see the night sky laced with all these fireballs that aren't misplaced. They touch my soul and leave no trace, but it's all a dream to stargazing up in space. The only stars I see are ones I can erase. I'm trying to follow lines that haven't been traced. I'm trying to see stars that aren't copy and paste. I'm trying to solve problems without getting laid to waste. See, my mind is like a broken constellation. I'm trying to find the cause, but there's no explanation. I've gone autopilot and the off button's broken. Falling asleep and I can't be awoken. I'll be back before it's noon. I'm a star yet, but I'll be one soon. I'm a star now and I'm shooting for the moon. It'll all be over when I break this cocoon. I'll be back before it's noon. I'm not a star yet, but I'll be one soon. I'm a star now and I'm shooting for the moon. It'll all be over when I break this cocoon. You can take
Like a
escape through my
metamorphosis kind
heart.
of thing?
You can raise all hell and tear the world apart. You can take my soul and shove it in the dark, but you'll never change the fact that I'm leaving a mark. I've been painting this picture of life with a broken paintbrush. Been writing these lyrics with a raw adrenaline rush. After writing these bars, I can feel true emotion. I can feel my devotion to this commotion. I can feel something approaching bigger than an ocean. I'm going next level with this promotion. I can feel history shifting, it's in motion. I'ma let it brew similar to a potion.
Was that a repeater or do we... And I got another fade out there, nice. To be fair, we don't have to do fade outs with every song. And this isn't me sort of offering a critique at this point. I think it's fine that we did. But yeah, usually if we're gonna have a big finish, it kind of needs to be like to have the message at the end, I suppose, you know. Here we have a resolute kind of determination of where we want to go after we've been dreaming about this stuff. And we're kind of looking for our own sort of niche within the solar system of where we can sort of pursue things. And you get the impression that at this point that they really do want to find fame and success. And they're going through this metamorphosis coming out of the cocoon, and they want to pursue and fly towards the sun without getting too close. So I think that that's a nice way to end an EP like this. I mean, I think I kind of get a feeling of what the EP is about at this point. So I'll talk about that after this and the overall conclusion. But just, I think that at this point, it's just nice to hear, again, EsJay quite resolute in their formatting there. The expression makes sense for someone who's made a sort of a firm decision. The clean vocals I'm not decided on. There was a flow and pattern to them rhythmically where we were trying to do double tracking, and I'm not sure if it, how do I say this? The note choices made sense. We hit the notes most of the time. If I'm not mistaken, it kind of sounded like we had the main vocals in the center, and then we had like an additional take on the left or something like that, which was kind of unusual. I think we were trying to maybe add contrast to the main vocal lines in the verse by panning the vocals there. We might have needed to filter the vocals with an EQ to kind of give them a bit more kind of a difference in the tone there, but it's also tricky because it's also a style I've heard where people kind of talk through those choruses, and then sometimes there can actually be a thing where we need to add more to the chorus instrumentally at that point to kind of build it up there. So I mean, I'm 50-50 on the clean vocals. I understand why we did that, and I appreciate what we're offering sort of range there. I'm undecided on how I feel about like them by themselves in the context of the piece. But I think it's cool to show that we are considering doing more than rapping or sort of speaking to people in this, and that's a really positive thing for future releases. The track itself at 2 minutes 36 is shorter than the rest of the pieces we've heard, with the exclusion of Hypnotize. It has a mixture of different sort of electric bass, piano, and drum parts, as well as some saxophones and some woodwinds, I think. It's just got a very kind of solemn focus with a minor leaning of the keys there, the bass being a bit more sort of proactive in parts there, but the piano really trying to sort of aim for a motif that just gives you enough to kind of like groove and nod your head along to what's not over coloring or overshadowing what's going on vocally. But I do like the kind of, again, the flutter of like the pan flute or whatever it is that we have in certain elements there. It gives it almost a like spiritual, otherworldly feel. And I do actually like a lot the rhyme scheme and the flow and pattern of some of those kind of rapped lines within this track as well. I get the impression that as we've gone through this, we've become more comfortable with the process of sort of recording ourselves. And we're just on this fourth track, we know how we want to end it. But I think some of those saxophone parts that we have just have this one, like they're at the exact correct position that I would want them to be in. Having a kind of a firm, kind of sassy sub lead or alt lead in the center of the stereo field might just be a little bit too much and might compete for attention with the main vocals. Put them to the side, you go back a little bit, oh, the saxophone's there, and bend back into the middle there. It's just a great sort of compositional device. I think you would have, yeah, I've gone back to the clean vocals around the 120 mark, because I think that having them at the halfway point insinuates that we are going to have more vocal styles in future releases. I think you would have needed to have had the clean vocals on both sides to kind of balance out the stereo field. The asymmetrical thing, I'm just not so sure about. I like the closed and open hi-hat patterns and how we accent with some of the opens as well. I think that's really neat, just from like a performance perspective on the kit there. And there's a great sort of eighth note, kind of like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that like rhythmically the piano plays along really nicely with, for the most part. The bass is nice and sort of like supportive in the low end as well. And we have more of the saxophone and other sort of sub leads as we go along, and they're sort of alternating how they're approaching things. And it's just, yeah, man. It's just nice to have that coloration and diversity compositionally, structurally within the mix. And the bass as well, old reliable, just like, it's just such a really sensible layering of instruments within the mix. The keys are never going to compete with the bass. The bass is such a firm sort of choice for the drums, and then any sort of flutes or like, you know, saxophones that we have are going to be in the mid to uppers. The minor leaning thematically is just an absolute no-brainer. You just are left with that instrumental sort of like outro section with the fade out, and it's just, you know, again, even though it's minor, it's not like we're sad about what we're attending to. It's almost like we're just alone in our room. It's more of a seriousness thing rather than a feeling sorry for ourselves situation. I think that the filtered strings that we have around the 2:05 mark of this track as well have this wonderful kind of glow that's just a really neat contrast to a lot of the more sort of static, sort of solid layers we had earlier to that, and it harkens back to Resting Place with a lot of those filtered sort of string elements there, and kind of brings it full circle. Like, we've gone through that bittersweet moment and now we're kind of focused. And so, like, as a final note, having the rapped vocals, the clean vocals and the rapped vocals and that, it's just absolutely no filler within this track, not a note out of place. Honestly, just really sensible songwriting from here. Like, I think that the structure was tight, and the theme overall, with the, again, the sophistication of some of those like extra sub-lead instrumental layers, that just added a bit more flavor to it that kind of, yeah, made it kind of pop off. I think this track would have been lesser without like the saxophone floats and stuff like that. Just, we understood we needed more and we did so. And the studio recording, mixing and mastering for this one, I'm actually happy with the vocal layers in this one. I think that this was a more comfortable. Again, I'm still sort of 50-50 on like the layering and first light tracks and stuff like that, but you could hear the bass, drums, keys, saxophones, woodwinds, etc. really neatly within the free spectrum and the stereo field there. Again, not super sure about the clean vocals and the way they were kind of like tracked and stuff. You could have potentially had the clean vocals kind of tracked on either side, but it's okay if we wanted asymmetrical. Nice and loud without pumping, with the bus compression limiting was handled. Great use, again, that filtered strings around a 2-minute mark there just to sort of switch things up without needing to be too sort of like inorganic with forcing pitches up. I'm going to talk about this EP more in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 3 tracks from an act named EsJay off of the EsJay EP. These songs being Resting Place featuring King Flame CEO as well as Dreamer and Stars. In this section, I'm going to be providing my overall thoughts on this EP as part of like an analysis from like vocals through to production, as well as sort of any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my thoughts on it from a general listener's perspective. I'm not going to be talking specifically on a per track basis, as each of these songs has had their own sort of mini conclusion after each of them. But first of all, what do we think this EP is about? I think this EP is about someone kind of coming to a realization of what they want to accomplish as a musician, finding their sort of resting place, their special place, trying to find a place to go towards. You know, they're not in stasis anymore. They're needing to move, either like finding a place, a happy place with other people around it, or I think in SJ's position, trying to sort of navigate our way in the world as we aspire to become the musician that we want to be. Dreamer being more about the kind of like the fantasy, the goal of what we want to accomplish with our raps. So I was doing like live shows, meeting the musicians we like and what's going to get there, and kind of sleeping on that. And what were the dreams we have with that. And then Stars is finally trying to find our place within the night sky, our place to head towards, and asserting that we need to start moving there, with the end of the EP kind of suggesting that we are on our way there, or that we know what we have to do. And so I think that that's just a really sensible thing to make an EP about. You know, it's you either talk about what you're going to do and the value you're going to provide, or your journey, your Bildungsroman-esque kind of situation, or you're talking about a concept or concepts. And I think that as a concept here about their growth or potential, or like their desires, it just humanizes SJ as well as King Flame CEO. They both did very well here, and just makes it really good to listen to. I do like the vocal performances across the board for the most part. I think King Flame CEO is very confident, and it was a bold move to have him in the first verse, if I'm not mistaken, for resting place. Very sort of assertive on the microphone, you know, discussed, you know, like the people they are with, you know, like the activities and proclivities they had for things. But I kind of preferred SJ's verse more. It was just very raw there. It was like we were still figuring stuff out as we were rapping it. And I just think that having those diverse sort of perspectives there, as well as the different styles of rapping there, was really effective, because you couldn't take for granted what you were being provided with. You couldn't interchange them. There are people at different stages working towards different resting places, but nonetheless still very interesting to listen to. Typically, the way that we held our lines and our rhythmic flow and the words came through clearly. And in most situations there, I think that the rhyme schemes were solid, and we were comfortable sort of performing on the microphone there. I think as SJ went through the EP, they became more confident and articulated themselves more sort of like comfortably, and I've said comfortable a lot. They got better as they went. And I think that by the end of it in Stars, they had a clear direction, and then they wanted to include some clean vocals, which I'm still in two minds about. We hit the notes that we needed to, and I understood sort of like hypothetically what we were trying to accomplish there. And I think that, again, the note choices harmonized neatly with the instrumental backing and were a nice sort of adjustment from the rapping that we'd had prior. I feel like as we continue to develop ourselves more, we'll find ways to vocalize and assert ourselves in ways that'll continue to get better and better. And I think that it's just making sure that we fill the stereo field, unless there's a clear reason for the asymmetry within the panning positions or decisions. But just the way we were prominent within the mix, regardless of what we're doing instrumentally. These tracks, you know, Resting Place, Dreamer, and Stars, typically had verse and chorus sections, as well as instrumental outros and breaks. And I think Resting Place had like a vocalist in there, kind of like sort of like talking about finding happiness within someone, and the guy at the end kind of says that they're going to find it with them, or that they're meeting them, which was a nice sort of touch. Dreamer with like vocal harmonies that entered more sort of synth pad territory once they went up an octave and sort of became more instrumental, and that was really fun. You know, we're not just having vocals in there for the sake of telling a story, we're there to add it as another instrumental layer within the mix. For Stars though, it was primarily SJ though, and they carried it. They were good. Really good. The main instruments throughout these pieces were drums, bass, keys. Well, I mean, there were a fair few. It depended on the track there. Guitars were kind of prominent there, with occasional sort of like picked patterns there, sort of jazzy chords there, filters, a lo-fi aesthetic of Dreamer was really wonderful there. But I just dig how kind of soft and soothing it was. The keys that we had in Stars had a really kind of wistful tone to them, articulating fifths and octaves with the minor leaning there, and fulfilling really sort of important fundamental roles of establishing a main melody outside of any sort of rapped elements, which are more sort of rhythm oriented. The bass guitar was a lot more active in resting place. I think that the keys were more sort of like mid-range and being more sort of like pad-like and Dreamer with the slower attack on those. Stars had a bit more sort of like sass in terms of how it approached kind of working around the root notes as well as some of the scales associated with the chord progressions in the pattern, simply because they weren't trying to overcomplicate the situation there and trying to sort of like elicit a sort of uncomfortable, unusual mood. With the strings in resting place as well as stars when they came in there in that end part, they were sort of nostalgic there. They had a glow, a romance to them that sounded kind of bittersweet, especially considering the subject matter though. It was like we were looking back on our past and looking towards the future with a sense of clarity, as opposed to the fading of the vinyl parts. And I think the saxophones always had some elements, as well as the pan flutes and any other sort of like trumpet elements, were typically either sort of directly related to the sample that we're rapping over, or they are more sort of related to being sort of like bits of ear candy there to add more sort of clarity or more sort of like content in terms of the chord progressions we had there, and more color into the mix. And I think that that's all we really needed. I haven't really spoken about the drums yet though. We had a variety of different drum tones, a mixture of claps and snares and kicks and chains there, hi-hat patterns, as well as little kind of ridey bits there, little clicks. The kits were different, but they all sounded like they made sense because they were more sort of like integrated within the remainder of the theme that the vocals were placed upon. It was like we were creating individual sort of concept tracks, beats that we were telling a story on. And I think that typically the tone of the drums as well as the patterns, whether they were quarters, eighths or 16th, made sense regardless of whether or not we were sort of rolling with sort of predominant eighths or quarters, or adding sort of ghost note 16ths to add a bit of flurry and flavor to it. Regardless of what we did with the kit, whether we even had it there or not, it was usually purposeful and added a sense of sort of like status on like the speed of the piece, the kind of urgency of it. But we typically were trying to keep it kind of chilled and relaxed. We were never trying to be too sort of frenetic or over the top with the percussion. It was almost always to add a further sense of rhythmic articulation to what was going on with EsJay, King Flame CEO, or anyone else involved. I just think there's sort of dreamy aesthetic. It's like the tones of the saxophone, it's the tone of the woodwinds, it's the tone like the reverbs and the kind of how soothing it is. This is a very relaxing EP to listen to. Even though you can hear EsJay has struggled, the use of extended kind of chords in some parts, as well as sort of straight sort of minors or like very subtle majors in others, is endearing. It's allowing you to sort of more sort of like chill and relax and enjoy the experience, whilst also taking in what EsJay is trying to sort of communicate to you. And I feel that's sensible. You have the instruments be big, you have the vocals be big, or you have both things be big. But if both things are big, you run the risk of not knowing what to focus on. So here, even though there was a maturity to the production, the way things were done here, we knew where to place our priorities. The studio recording, mixing and mastering overall was solid. I think for the most part, the beats sounded great, that they weren't just leveled and produced well. They had their own sort of personality and specific kind of like coloration or quote unquote vibe to them. Resting Place was very much a kind of a Motown kind of like 70s kind of like sound there. Dreamwalk being more sort of like lo-fi hip hop, and I'm not sure how to describe Stars there. It was a bit more sort of like modern or contemporary there, but just being able to sort of go over those different styles of music and get your vocals to suit whichever is testament to EsJay's kind of proficiency at this point as with the work they've done. As they continue to grow as musicians, it'd be cool to sort of figure out or listen to what else they do. The vocals were sometimes a little bit too loud in the mix for my tastes, but I think simply I would need a second chance through headphones, and that's something I've already spoken about before on several occasions. And there were parts where I listened to them and now I know they fit, it's totally fine. Literally there's no other real applicable constructive critique. I spoke about the clean vocals and how I wasn't necessarily sure about the panning of different parts of that and the way they were done, but it's more sort of a stylistic decision thing. Typically things surrounded you in the headphones. Streamer specifically had a lot of interesting sort of like filter kind of phased or reverb remix sort of like delayed elements there, which kind of swum. You sound like you were swimming in the music itself. It was sort of surreal, I suppose, in that approach. I liked the automation of some of the volumes near the end. I liked how they kind of faded out. And I think that typically the automation was handled well. It was nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression limiting was handled. And even if there was a little bit of sort of like distortion on some of the vocal takes, we're just learning. We're still just figuring it out, and it's totally okay. By the time we get around to releasing our album after the EP, I assume there'll be an album at some point, I feel like we'll just kind of be figuring out those little quirks and kind of putting forward something really special now that we've kind of got our eyes set on the stars we want to fly towards, or the star that we want to be. Already mentioned any applicable constructive critiques, it's not worth going that over here. From a general listener's perspective, I feel positive about this. It seems like a very earnest, honest, and authentic performance from a hip-hop musician that has clear intent on what they want to accomplish, and I liked listening to it. Sometimes I can feel a little bit affronting, or it can feel a little bit affronting to hear someone just talk about how great they are, and you're listening to them, and it's like, I don't know if you are that good. I'm listening to this, I'm not particularly convinced. But again, as I mentioned with Dreamer, I was listening to someone who wasn't sure who was figuring out what it would be like to get there. They've put work in, don't get me wrong, but I just liked how kind of grounded and down to earth that was. Just personally, that was really special. It makes me consider that they're taking this seriously and that they will actually find some success at some point. And I wish them all the best in their musical endeavors. Because thank you for watching my review of this EP from an acts named EsJay, titled the EsJay EP. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and their Bandlab page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.